When I turned 70, I thought it would be the perfect time for my family to come together. I was wrong. My son Ryan and his wife Lisa had different plans. They left me stranded in a remote lodge in Newfoundland, and I couldn't have known how badly they had been planning this moment. As I sat there alone waiting for their return, I felt the bitter sting of betrayal. I had spent my life taking care of them, raising Ryan to be a good man, believing that family would always be there. But as the hours stretched into days, I began to understand just how wrong I was. The lodge, once a charming retreat, now felt like a cold prison. The empty rooms echoed with memories of happier times when Ryan was young, and the family was whole. But all of that seemed so distant now, so far removed from the harsh reality that stared me in the face. No one had told me they wouldn't return. No one had even sent a message. I was left to sit there, in a place so far removed from my own life, feeling like a forgotten relic. I called Ryan's phone several times, but he never picked up. I tried Lisa's number, but it went straight to voicemail. My fingers trembled as I dialed again, each ring a cruel reminder that I had been abandoned. As I looked out at the vast, snow-covered landscape, a part of me wondered if I was being punished. But for what? For caring too much? For giving them everything I had? My mind raced with questions, but no answers came. I checked my phone again, but there were no messages, no calls. I hadn't even been left with a simple excuse. It was as though I never mattered at all. The quiet was unbearable. I tried to distract myself by reading a book I had brought along, but the words blurred as my thoughts swirled around me. How had things gotten so bad? How had my family become so distant, so uncaring? I had always been there for them, through every up and down, every hardship. But now, sitting alone in this desolate place, I realized that all of that meant nothing. I was nothing more than an inconvenience to them. The realization hit me hard. They had planned this, I was sure of it. Now, they had chosen this remote lodge because they knew I would have nowhere else to go. It wasn't just that they forgot about me. They had intentionally left me behind. The thought made my stomach turn, but at the same time, something else began to stir inside me. Anger. I had spent too many years being the caretaker, being the one who kept the family together, and this was how they repaid me. No, this wasn't how it was going to end. I wasn't just going to sit here and let them have their way. I wasn't going to let them strip away my dignity and my life. I had one thing they didn't expect, my strength, and I would find a way to use it. As the days passed, I stopped calling. I stopped waiting for them to show up. I would take matters into my own hands. There was a spark inside me that had been buried for too long, and it was starting to burn brighter. They had made one mistake. They underestimated me. They thought I was weak, helpless, that I would just sit and wait for them to decide my fate. But I had lived too long to let anyone control me like that. I would find a way out. I would take back what was mine. And I would make sure they knew that they had made the biggest mistake of their lives by abandoning me here. The days dragged on, and with each passing hour, I began to feel the weight of what had happened more and more. At first I couldn't believe it. How could Ryan, my own son, leave me in this cold, desolate place, with nothing but the wind howling outside and the eerie silence inside? I had spent so many years caring for him, making sure he had everything he needed, that I never thought he would be capable of something like this. But now, as I sat alone in the small, dimly lit lodge, I started to see it clearly. They had planned this. It wasn't just a careless mistake or a misunderstanding. It was intentional. They wanted me gone. I wasn't sure how long they had been planning it, but I knew now that it had been in the works for a while. It wasn't just that they abandoned me. They had carefully chosen this remote location, far from the comfort of home, and left me without so much as a phone call. I wondered if they thought I wouldn't notice, or maybe they thought I'd just accept it and move on. But that was where they were wrong. I had spent my life taking care of them, nurturing them, always putting their needs before mine. But now, in this quiet, isolated place, I was starting to realize that I had to take care of myself for once. I wasn't going to sit here and let them decide my fate. I wasn't going to let them win. The first day I spent alone at the lodge was the hardest. I tried to distract myself, flipping through the pages of a book I had brought along. But it was hard to concentrate. My mind kept drifting back to the conversation I had with Ryan just before they left. I could still hear his voice, casual and dismissive, as he told me they would be back soon. I had believed him then, but now I saw it for what it was. An excuse, a lie, just a way to get rid of me without feeling guilty. My thoughts were interrupted by the sound of the phone ringing. I grabbed it quickly, hoping it was Ryan calling to apologize, to explain why they hadn't returned. But when I answered, there was nothing but silence on the other end. My heart sank. It was like they were completely ignoring me, pretending I didn't even exist. I hung up the phone and stared at it for a moment, my fingers tightening around the device. How had things gotten so bad? I had spent my life being the glue that held everything together. But now I was nothing more than an inconvenience. I couldn't stop the wave of anger that washed over me. How dare they treat me like this? After all the years I had given them, after everything I had done for them, this is how they repaid me. I wasn't just going to sit here and cry. I wasn't going to let them see me broken. I had to figure out a way to get out of here, to take back control of my life. I had spent so many years being the caretaker, always giving and never asking for anything in return. But now I was done. With that, I was going to stand up for myself. The second day was no better. I woke up to an empty room, the cold air creeping through the cracks in the walls. It was like the world had forgotten about me, like I didn't matter anymore. I tried to stay positive, telling myself that maybe they just needed more time. Maybe they had been delayed. But deep down I knew that wasn't the case. I had started to piece things together, the small signs that had been there all along but that I had ignored. The way Ryan had become more distant after he married Lisa, the way Lisa always seemed to push me aside, as if I was a burden. It all started to make sense. They had been planning this for months, maybe even longer. They wanted my house, my money, everything I had worked so hard for. I was just in the way. By the third day I had had enough. I wasn't going to sit around and wait for them to decide what to do with me. I had to make a plan. I spent the day thinking, trying to come up with a way to get back at them, a way to show them that I wasn't as helpless as they thought. I would find a way to take back control. I started by making a list of everything I needed to do. I needed to contact a lawyer, make sure my assets were protected, and figure out how to get back home. I wasn't sure how I was going to do it, but I knew I had to try. I wasn't going to let them win. The lodge, once a place of peace and escape, now felt like a prison. But I wasn't going to let it break me. I would leave this place, and when I did, I would make sure they would never forget how they treated me. They had made the mistake of underestimating me, and I wasn't going to let them get away with it. The fourth day, I woke up to the same empty room, the same coldness, and the same haunting silence. Every day felt like it was stretching out longer than the last, but I had stopped waiting for Ryan and Lisa. I had already made up my mind. I wasn't going to let them continue to make decisions for me. It wasn't just the abandonment that hurt anymore. It was the realization that they saw me as someone who could be discarded, someone whose years of love and sacrifice meant nothing. I had to face the facts, as painful as they were. They had been planning this for a while. It wasn't a coincidence that they had taken me to a remote lodge, far from anyone who could help. They thought I was too weak to notice, too old to fight back, but they were wrong. I was done being their pawn. I spent the next few hours pacing the room, trying to think of a way out of here. I knew I had to make it back home, but I didn't want to call them again. I had already tried that, and each time they ignored me. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of hearing me beg. I couldn't. I was better than that. Instead, I focused on what I could control. My phone was my only link to the outside world, so I started searching for information. I needed to know how to get to the nearest town, how to find a lawyer, someone who could help me fight back. I wasn't about to let them take what was mine. I wasn't about to let them take away my dignity. As I started researching, I began to formulate a plan. I would get out of here, and I would make sure that Ryan and Lisa understood the consequences of their actions. But there was one thing I had to do first. I needed to prepare myself for what was coming. It was time for me to face them, to confront them with the truth. I wasn't sure how I was going to do it, but I knew I had to. It wasn't enough to just leave. I needed to stand up for myself, to show them that I was not the helpless old woman they thought I was. I was more than that. I had spent so many years hiding my strength, burying it beneath layers of duty and obligation, but now it was time to let it out. By the time the sun began to set, I had a plan. It wasn't perfect, but it was all I had. I would leave the lodge first thing in the morning. Would make my way to the nearest town and find a way to get back home. I would contact a lawyer, someone who could help me secure my assets and make sure Ryan and Lisa couldn't get away with what they had done. I wasn't going to let them win. I wasn't going to let them walk all over me. The days of being the dutiful mother, the self-sacrificing wife were over. I was done being the person they could take advantage of. As the evening fell, I sat in the silence of the lodge, my mind focused on what I had to do. I could feel the anger building inside me, but it was different now. It wasn't just anger. It was power. It was the strength I had buried for so long. The strength that was finally rising to the surface. They had made a mistake. They had underestimated me. They thought I was weak, that I wouldn't fight back. But they didn't know me. They didn't know how far I was willing to go to protect myself, to protect what was mine. The thought of confronting them, of standing up to them, made my heart race. I didn't know what their reaction would be, but I knew one thing. I was ready. I had spent so many years being afraid, being unsure of myself, but now, in this moment, I realized that I was stronger than I had ever given myself credit for. It was time to take control of my life again. It was time to show them that I was not someone to be discarded. The next day when they arrived, I would be ready. I would not let them treat me like I was invisible any longer. I had a voice and I was going to use it. I was going to stand tall, and I was going to make sure they understood that I would not be silenced. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of determination that I hadn't felt in years. The cold light of the morning streamed in through the small window, casting long shadows across the empty room. I had spent the night planning, going over the steps I needed to take to regain control of my life. I wasn't going to let Ryan and Lisa think they had won. They may have left me here, abandoned. Me in a place that felt like a prison, but I was no longer the same woman who had arrived here days ago. The first thing I did was gather my belongings, folding my clothes carefully and placing them into the small suitcase I had brought. It wasn't much, but it was enough. I wasn't sure how I would get back to the city, but I had to at least try. The idea of walking into town seemed impossible, but it was the only option I had. I couldn't rely on Ryan or Lisa. They had proven that. As I began packing, I found my phone and checked the messages again. Still nothing. No texts. No missed calls. Just silence. It was like I didn't even exist to them anymore. I pressed the power button, hoping for some kind of sign, but the screen remained dark. The battery had died. Of course it had. It felt symbolic somehow, like everything that had been slowly draining away from me. My energy, my self-worth, my dignity, had all been taken without me even realizing it. I put the phone down and took a deep breath. I had to stay focused. The lodge felt smaller now, the walls pressing in around me. I couldn't stay here anymore. I needed to get out. I needed to go back to where I belonged, to my life, to my home. The thought of seeing my house again, of being in familiar surroundings, gave me the strength I needed to move forward. I opened the door and stepped outside. The cold air hit me immediately, the sharp sting of the Newfoundland wind biting at my face. It wasn't a long walk to the nearest town, but it felt like an eternity. I pushed forward, my mind set on the journey ahead. With every step, I felt the weight of the past few days lift just a little more. I wasn't sure what I would do once I reached the town, but I knew one thing for sure. I was not going to be their victim. I had spent so much time taking care of them, of being there when they needed me, and now it was my turn. I had the right to take care of myself. As I walked, I thought about Ryan and Lisa, about all the things they had done to push me out of their lives. It was a bitter thought, but I couldn't ignore it. They hadn't just left me at the lodge. They had made me feel like I was nothing, like I didn't matter. And maybe, just maybe, they thought I wouldn't fight back. But they didn't know me. They didn't know the strength that I had inside me. The sun was starting to set by the time I reached the small town. I could feel my legs aching from the long walk, but I pushed through the pain. I needed to get to a phone. I needed to call someone who could help me. The first place I found was a small diner, the kind that felt like it had been there for decades. I stepped inside, the warmth from the heater wrapping around me like a blanket. I walked up to the counter and asked the waitress if I could use the phone. She gave me a curious look, but I didn't care. I just needed to make the call. The phone rang 3 times before someone picked up. It was my old friend Judy. When she answered, her voice sounded just as I remembered, kind, warm, and full of concern. "Evelyn, is that you? Are you okay?" I could hear the worry in her voice, and for the first time in days, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. "I'm fine," I said, trying to sound calm, though I could feel the emotion rising in my chest. I just need your help. I need to get back home. I explained the situation as best as I could, telling her how Ryan and Lisa had abandoned me at the lodge. Judy was furious and I could tell she wanted to rush over and help me, but I assured her I could handle it. She promised to find a lawyer who could help me secure my assets and make sure that Ryan and Lisa couldn't get away with what they had done. I wasn't sure what the next steps would be, but for the first time since I had arrived at the lodge, I felt like I had some control over my situation. Judy told me to stay put, that she would be there as soon as she could. I thanked her and hung up the phone, the weight on my shoulders easing just a little. I wasn't alone anymore. The town was quiet, but there was a certain peace in the air now. I sat down at one of the booths in the diner, my mind racing with everything that had happened. I was no longer afraid of what might come next. I had a plan and I wasn't going to let Ryan and Lisa win. I was going to take back control of my life. The world outside the diner seemed so different now, like I was seeing it with new eyes. It wasn't just about getting back home anymore. It was about reclaiming my dignity, my strength, and my future. I had spent too long being the one who always gave, who always sacrificed. Now it was time for me to take what was mine. I wasn't going to let them walk all over me any longer. The day Judy arrived, everything seemed to shift in an instant. She was just as I remembered, strong, determined, and always ready to lend a hand when I needed it most. I had only shared part of the truth on the phone. I couldn't bring myself to tell her everything, not yet. The betrayal was still too raw, still too fresh, but I could feel the warmth of her support already. She had been on the phone with a lawyer by the time I hung up, and now she was here in the small diner, sitting across from me with a look of concern that made my chest tighten. "Evelyn, you don't have to do this alone," she said gently, her voice full of reassurance. I looked at her, grateful but still wary. "I don't want to cause trouble, Judy. I just want to go home." But even as I said the words, I knew it wasn't that simple anymore. It wasn't just about returning to my house. It was about taking back what was mine and showing my family that I would no longer be ignored. Judy, sensing my hesitation, reached over and placed her hand on mine. "You've always been there for them, Evelyn. It's time they learn to respect you. You've done enough." Her words echoed in my mind, and for the first time in days, I let myself believe them. I had done enough. Now it was time for them to understand the cost of taking me for granted. As we left the diner and stepped into the cold air, I felt a sense of calm settle over me. I wasn't rushing to confront them. I was preparing. I was taking control. The ride to my house was quiet, save for the soft hum of the engine. I glanced out the window, my thoughts consumed by what was coming next. Judy had already arranged for the lawyer to meet us, but I wasn't sure what to expect. Would Ryan and Lisa be there waiting for me to give up? Would they try to apologize, pretending nothing had happened? No matter what, I wouldn't let them have the upper hand. When we pulled into the driveway, I took a deep breath. The house was just as I remembered it. The garden still held the faintest trace of the flowers I used to care for, and the front porch looked exactly as it had the last time I stepped inside. I thought about the years my husband and I spent building this place, the memories we'd created, and how easily it could all be taken away if I let them. The thought made my blood run cold. As I opened the door, I was hit by the familiar scent of the house, the wood, the old leather chairs, and the quiet peace that had once filled this space. But it felt different now. It felt like a battlefield. I stepped inside, my heart pounding. I could hear footsteps upstairs, the faint sound of voices drifting down the hallway. Ryan, Lisa. They were here waiting for me, no doubt expecting me to be weak, to have given up. They didn't know me at all. I walked slowly down the hall, my steps deliberate and steady. I wasn't afraid. I was prepared. When I reached the living room, I found them sitting on the couch, just as I had imagined. They didn't look up at first, too busy talking amongst themselves. But when they heard the door close behind me, they froze. Ryan stood up, his face a mixture of surprise and confusion. "Mom, what are you doing here?" he asked, his voice unsure, as if he had expected me to be somewhere else waiting for their apology. "I came home," I said quietly, my voice steady. "I'm not leaving. Not this time." Lisa looked up at me, her eyes cold, calculating. "You don't belong here anymore," she said, her tone dismissive. "This house isn't yours to keep." I felt a wave of anger, but I didn't let it show. I wasn't going to let her words affect me. Not anymore. You think you can just take it from me? I asked, taking a step forward. You think I'll just walk away and let you have everything I've worked for? Ryan stepped in between us, his face contorted in frustration. Mom, you're not thinking straight. This is for your own good. We need to sell the house. We can't keep it. No, I said firmly, my voice growing stronger. I'm not selling. I'm not going anywhere. This is my home. And you're not taking it from me. The silence that followed was deafening. Lisa crossed her arms, a smug smile on her face. You don't have a choice, she said. We've already made the arrangements. You're out of the picture. I could feel the weight of her words, but it only fueled my resolve. I wasn't about to let them win. Not like this. You've underestimated me, I said, my voice low and steady. I have a lawyer now. I've made sure everything is in place. You won't take anything from me. The look on their faces was priceless. Ryan's jaw tightened and Lisa's eyes narrowed. You don't scare us, Ryan muttered. But I could see the doubt creeping into his eyes. They hadn't expected me to fight back. They thought I would fold, that I would give up just like I always had. But I wasn't the same woman anymore. I had learned to stand up for myself. And I wasn't going to let them control me any longer. The next morning as the sun rose, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. I had been waiting for this moment for so long. But now that it was here, I wasn't sure what to expect. I had prepared myself for confrontation, for the possibility that Ryan and Lisa might try to take everything from me, but now I was ready. I wasn't the same woman who had arrived at that remote lodge days ago. The isolation had given me clarity. The silence had given me strength. Today I was going to make sure they understood that I wasn't someone to be pushed around anymore. The lawyer arrived shortly after breakfast, a tall man with a professional demeanor and a quiet, reassuring voice. His name was Mark Stevens, and from the moment he stepped inside, I knew I had made the right choice. He listened carefully as I explained the situation, detailing the way Ryan and Lisa had left me stranded, the plans they had to sell the house and take control of my assets. As I spoke, I could see the shock on his face. He was surprised, but not at the situation itself. He was surprised that I had waited so long to take action. We can stop this, he said, his voice steady. I'll make sure they don't get away with it. We'll put everything in place, and they'll have no choice but to back off. For the first time in days, I felt a sense of hope. I wasn't alone anymore. I wasn't going to be their victim. I was taking control of my life again. As Mark prepared the necessary paperwork, I thought about the years I had spent raising Ryan, the sacrifices I had made, and the love I had given to my family. It seemed almost impossible to believe that they could turn their backs on me so easily. But as I looked around my house, I realized it was my home, my space, my life, and no one had the right to take that from me. Mark left after a few hours, promising to file the necessary documents and ensure everything was in motion. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders, but there was still work to be done. I wasn't just going to sit back and wait for things to unfold. I had learned that I needed to be proactive, that I needed to take the reins and show them that I wouldn't be intimidated. That evening, Ryan and Lisa arrived, just as I had anticipated. They walked through the door, both of them looking as if they had been caught off guard. They didn't expect me to be so calm, to be so collected. I stood in the living room, my arms crossed, my posture firm. When they saw me, their expressions were a mixture of confusion and disbelief. Mom, what are you doing here? Ryan asked, his voice tense. You weren't supposed to be here. We need to talk. I didn't flinch. I've already talked to a lawyer. I said, my voice clear. I'm not going anywhere. This house is mine, and I'm not selling it. The shock on their faces was evident, but it didn't faze me. I wasn't going to let them manipulate me anymore. Lisa opened her mouth to speak, but I held up my hand, silencing her. I've spent my whole life putting others first, I said, my voice steady. I've given everything I had to make sure you were happy, to make sure you had everything you needed. But no more. I'm done being the one who sacrifices. Ryan looked at me, his eyes narrowing. This is ridiculous, he said, his tone laced with frustration. You're being stubborn. You're just upset because we're trying to help you. Help me. I repeated, the words tasting bitter. You've never helped me. You've taken from me. You've treated me like I'm nothing. Lisa shifted uncomfortably, but she didn't speak. She just stood there watching me, as if trying to assess what I was going to do next. I wasn't sure if they expected me to break down to cry, but I wasn't about to give them that satisfaction. I had learned to hold my ground. You can't control me anymore, I said, looking directly at Ryan. I'm done being your pawn. This is my life, and I'll live it the way I want to. There was a long pause, the tension thick in the air. Ryan opened his mouth to argue, but then closed it again. He knew I wasn't backing down. For the first time he seemed unsure of himself. I could see the realization dawning on him that I wasn't going to give up, that I wasn't going to be manipulated any longer. Lisa's face hardened, but she said nothing. I could feel the shift in the room, the change in the air. I had taken control and they could see it. They could feel it. After a few moments of silence, Ryan turned away, his jaw clenched in frustration. We'll see about this, he muttered under his breath, but I didn't care. I had made my stand and I wasn't going to back down. They could try to manipulate me all they wanted, but I was no longer the same woman who had quietly accepted their behavior. I was stronger now. I knew my worth, and I wasn't afraid to fight for. The next few days were a blur. I spent most of my time preparing, gathering everything I needed, and making sure the paperwork was in order. Mark, the lawyer, had been working quickly, filing everything that was necessary to stop Ryan and Lisa from taking control of what was mine. I was finally starting to feel like I had a handle on everything again, but I knew there was one final step left. I needed to confront them. Ryan and Lisa hadn't made any more attempts to contact me, but I could feel the tension building. They had no idea what was coming. I had spent too long letting them make decisions for me, letting them push me around, but that was over now. When they walked through the door that afternoon, they looked as if they were ready for a fight. Ryan's jaw was tight, his eyes cold, and Lisa stood next to him, arms crossed, looking just as indifferent as ever. But I wasn't intimidated. I had spent so many years trying to make peace, trying to be the mother they wanted, the grandmother they expected. But now I was the one in control. I wasn't going to let them walk all over me anymore. As they stepped into the living room, I looked at them, not with anger, but with calm determination. I'm not leaving, I said, my voice firm, unwavering. Ryan opened his mouth to speak, but I cut him off. You can't take what's mine. I've already made sure of that. The shock on their faces was enough to make me feel a rush of satisfaction. They weren't used to me standing up for myself. They thought they had me trapped, that I would just give in to them. But I wasn't the same woman I had been a few days ago. Lisa looked at me, her eyes narrowing in disbelief. You don't know what you're doing, she said, her voice cold. You're making a huge mistake. I stood tall, meeting her gaze with a calm I didn't even know I had. No, irraplia quietly. The mistake was thinking I wouldn't fight back. The tension in the room thickened, but I didn't back down. I didn't feel scared anymore. I felt free. Ryan stepped forward, his hands clenched at his sides. You think you can just keep everything from us? He asked, his voice tight. You're not in control anymore, Mom. I am in control, I said, feeling a surge of confidence. I've worked hard for everything I have, and I'm not going to let you take it from me. Ryan looked at me, his face twisting in frustration. He glanced over at Lisa, but she didn't say anything. It was as if they both knew deep down that they had already lost. You're not welcome here, Ryan muttered, his words barely above a whisper. I never wanted things to go this way, but you're making it impossible. I didn't feel a thing. No guilt. No regret. I had given them every chance to respect me, to be a family. But they had chosen their path, and I was done walking down it with them. You've made your choice, I said, my voice steady. Now I'm making mine. There was a long silence before Lisa finally spoke, her voice low and almost uncertain. You're not going to win this, she said. We'll take this to court. You can't stop us. I didn't flinch. I wasn't afraid. We'll see about that, I replied calmly. The truth was I didn't need to fight them anymore. I had already won. I had reclaimed my power. For the first time in years I was living for myself. I had no intention of letting them break me. No matter what they did, no matter how hard they tried to make me feel small, I was done being their victim. This was my life and I was going to live it the way I wanted. As Ryan and Lisa turned to leave, I felt a strange sense of peace settle over me. I knew this wasn't over, but I didn't care. I had made my stand. I had proven that I could be strong when it mattered most. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe again. I was no longer bound by their expectations. I had taken control of my future. And that was something no one could take from me. Days passed, and the tension in the house remained thick. I could feel the weight of everything shifting, but there was a strange calmness inside me now. I had done what I needed to do. I had taken back control of my life, and no matter what Ryan and Lisa tried, they could no longer manipulate me the way they had before. They were still trying to push their way into my life, still making moves to force me into submission, but it was no use. I was no longer afraid. I no longer feared their disappointment, their judgment, or their plans for my future. I knew what I wanted and I would fight for it. The days without them were strange, but in the quiet, I found a kind of peace I hadn't known in years. The silence wasn't as oppressive as it had been when I first arrived home, knowing they were plotting behind my back. Now it was my time. It was my space. I spent time reflecting on all the years I had spent being the one who kept the family together, the one who always made sure everyone had what they needed. I thought about my late husband, about the life we had built, and how easy it was for Ryan and Lisa to forget all of it. It was painful, but I didn't allow myself to dwell on the hurt. I knew I had done everything in my power to be a good mother, to give them a life they could be proud of. I had done my best. I had been more than enough. I stood in the kitchen one afternoon, preparing a meal for myself, when I heard the doorbell ring. I wasn't expecting anyone. My heart skipped a beat. My first thought was that it was Ryan or Lisa trying to reconcile, trying to apologize, but I wasn't interested in hearing their excuses. But when I opened the door, I saw someone I hadn't expected. It was Judy. She was standing there, her usual warm smile on her face, but there was something in her eyes that told me this wasn't a social visit. I thought I'd stop by, she said, stepping inside. I wanted to check on you. See how you're holding up. I invited her in, grateful for her support. It had been a long time since I had someone like her in my corner. She had always been a friend, someone I could trust, and now more than ever I needed that trust. As we sat in the living room, she listened as I recounted the latest with Ryan and Lisa. I could feel the anger building up again, but I didn't let it consume me. I had to remain calm for myself, for my peace of mind. Judy's face softened as she listened, and when I finished, she gave me a knowing look. You've done the right thing, she said gently. But they won't just let it go, Evelyn. You have to be ready for what's coming next. I nodded, already knowing what she meant. Ryan and Lisa weren't going to back down easily. They would try to fight me, to make me feel small again. But I was ready. I had to be. Later that day, I decided to take a walk around the garden. It had been a while since I had taken the time to appreciate the flowers, the trees, the life that surrounded me. The garden was a place where I had spent countless hours with my husband, planting, nurturing, and watching everything grow. It was peaceful, and for a moment, I could almost pretend that everything was normal again. But as I walked through the familiar paths, I realized that nothing would ever be the same. I wasn't the same. I wasn't the person I had been before all of this happened. I was stronger now. I had to be. When I returned to the house, I felt a sense of resolve settle over me. I wasn't going to back down no matter what Ryan and Lisa tried. I had worked too hard for this home, for my peace, for my life. I wasn't going to let anyone take that from me. The next few days were a blur of paperwork, phone calls, and meetings with Mark, the lawyer. The process was long and it wasn't easy, but I didn't care. I wasn't going to let them get away with what they had done. I was going to make sure they paid the price for their actions. The day finally came when I had to face them again. I had received the paperwork that proved I was in the right, that my ownership of the house was secure. Ryan and Lisa had no claim to it, no right to try and take it from me. I wasn't afraid to confront them anymore. This time when they came to the house I was ready. Ryan knocked on the door and I opened it, standing tall. Lisa was with him, her eyes cold as ever. They didn't speak at first. They just stood there, looking at me, probably waiting for me to back down. But I wasn't going to. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing me falter. We need to talk, Ryan said, his voice tight. I don't think there's anything left to say. I replied calmly, my voice steady. I've made my decision. The house is mine and I'm not selling it. I'm not going anywhere. Lisa stepped forward, her expression hard. You're making a mistake, she said, her tone cold. You can't keep this house all to yourself. You're not in control anymore. I didn't flinch. I'm in control of my life, I said, meeting her gaze. And you're not taking that from me. There was a moment of silence before Ryan spoke again, his face a mixture of anger and frustration. You'll regret this, he said, his voice low. We're not done with this. Maybe not, I replied. But I'm done with you. The words hung in the air, and for the first time I saw doubt in their eyes. They had thought they could push me around, that I would just give in. But I hadn't. And now they were the ones who had to face the consequences of their actions. It had been a week since my confrontation with Ryan and Lisa. The air was still thick with the tension between us, but I had no intention of letting that affect me. I had made my decision and I wasn't going to back down. The lawyer had finalized all the necessary documents, and now it was just a matter of waiting for everything to unfold. My mind, however, didn't allow me to simply sit and wait. The house was quiet now, but it wasn't the same as before. The silence wasn't filled with the warmth of memories, or the comfort of knowing my family was nearby. Instead, it was a heavy silence, one that spoke volumes about how things had changed. I spent my days sorting through old papers, cleaning out drawers I hadn't touched in years, and organizing things that had been neglected for too long. In a way, it felt like I was reclaiming my life piece by piece. Every task I completed felt like a small victory, a reminder that I was in control now, not them. But as much as I focused on the tasks at hand, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen. Ryan and Lisa had not given up, and I knew they wouldn't. But I was ready for whatever came next. I had prepared myself mentally and emotionally. I was no longer the woman they had underestimated. I was stronger than that, stronger than they could ever imagine. And as I stood there looking out the window at the garden I had spent so many years tending to, I realized how far I had come. This was my home, my life, and I wasn't going to let them take it away from me. The next day the phone rang. I glanced at the caller ID and saw it was Ryan. I had a moment of hesitation, but I picked up the phone anyway. Mom. Ryan's voice came through, strained and uncertain. We need to talk. I don't think there's anything left to talk about, I replied, my voice calm. You made your decision and I've made mine. There was a pause on the other end of the line, and I could almost hear him trying to figure out how to proceed. Look, I know things have been difficult, he said, his tone shifting slightly. But we're family. We can figure this out. Family. I repeated, my voice steady. If you were really concerned about family, you wouldn't have treated me the way you did. You wouldn't have abandoned me at that lodge. You wouldn't have tried to take what was mine. Ryan sighed, and I could hear the frustration in his breath. I never wanted any of this, he said, almost pleading. I thought you'd be better off. Better off. I echoed, disbelief in my voice. Better off being treated like an outsider in my own family? Better off being discarded like I didn't matter? He was silent for a moment, and I could tell he didn't have an answer. I wasn't expecting one. I've already moved on, I continued, my tone firm. I'm done with your manipulation. I'm done with being treated as if I don't deserve respect. I'm not going to let you destroy me. Another pause. Mom, I didn't know it was going to go this far, Ryan said quietly, regret creeping into his voice. I didn't think you'd fight back. I felt a strange mix of anger and sorrow. At his words, they thought I was weak. They thought they could control me. But I wasn't weak. And now they had to face the consequences. Well, now you know, I said, my voice unshaken. I'm not the woman you think I am. And I'm not going anywhere. You don't get to decide my future. With that, I hung up the phone. It wasn't a moment of victory. It wasn't a moment of triumph. It was simply the next step. The next part of the journey that would allow me to move forward. For so long I had allowed them to define me. I had let their actions control my emotions. But not anymore. I was reclaiming my life, and nothing was going to stop me. As I set the phone down, I looked around the room. The house felt different now. Felt like mine again. The memories of my husband, of Ryan growing up, of everything I had built, still lingered in the corners of this place. but it no longer felt like a prison, felt like a home, and I was finally free. The days that followed were quiet, but they were full of a peace I hadn't known in years. Ryan and Lisa didn't come back. They didn't call. And I didn't need them to. I had taken control of my own destiny. I had stood up for myself and I was no longer their victim. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their validation. All I needed was the strength to keep moving forward. And that was exactly what I was going to do.